Hello again, everyone. Your bad grandpa, Charlie Michaels here, back with you again. And I'm not bad just because I use vulgarisms like ARSE. No, I'm actually bad because I have not subscribed to the gospel according to personal sacrifice free, easy believism. And that makes me bad. I'm one of these lordship people who think you actually have to belong to Jesus before you can share in his righteousness on Judgment Day. Yes, that makes me bad, according to my Generation Z critics. That and the fact that I also slept with all their grandmothers, they hate me for that. Um, Not much I can do about the latter. However, I am trying to convince them, bring them around to the right way of thinking about the former, which is that the gospel, according to personal sacrifice free, easy believism, is alive from hell. And that's what this series is all about. Believe the Gospel, my ARSE, Part 6. Believe doesn't mean believe. It means entrust, turn control over to the gospel. The gospel is not shorthand for how do I get rid of my sin problem? No, the gospel means there's a new king, and his name is Jesus. Entrust yourself to him. Entrust authority to him. And ARSE, well, that's a vulgarism. Actually, it's an archaism. And I use it because it recalls to mind the original translators of the English Bible. People like William Tyndale, Miles Coverdale, John Rogers. Two of the three mentioned were burned at the stake for putting the Bible into English. They use terms like ARSE, okay? And when I use it, I'm trying to recall to mind these Augustinian monergists who put our Bible into English in defiance of the Roman Catholic Church, who weaponized the New Testament, and who are the primary reasons why we are out here 500 years later having these arguments about lordship salvation, free grace, sola fide, and a number of other, schisms that we have out here in the Christian world, directly traceable to people who use terms like ARSE. I apologize for this blinking you see going on the screen. I don't know what's causing it. The Zoom program, perhaps I'm being surveilled by one of you. I don't know. We'll just have to work through it, I guess, until I get a new, perhaps, I don't know, camera. Maybe that's the source of the problem. I don't know. Anyway, I have 10 slides for you tonight to add to part 6. Tonight, we're going to look at the first century witnesses of the use of the verb pisteuo. Talking about people like Philo of Alexandria, Flavius Josephus, the Jewish historian of the first century, also a Roman historian named Appian. Okay, so we're going to look at their use, this extra biblical evidence, which proves that the verb that got translated believe didn't have to be translated believe. It was translated believe by Augustinian monergists hell-bent on escaping the Roman Catholic Church and their sacraments. And I've been trying to prove that over these past 6 parts. For those of you who, for some reason, missed the first 3 parts, you can get like a 30-minute synopsis of those 3 hours in the 4th part. I'm going to have a link to the entire playlist in the description below here. So if you go to the 4th selection there, recap of the left cheek, I think it's called, you can get a synopsis of the first 3 parts within 30 minutes. Part 4 showed some of the ancient Greeks, like Theophrastus, their use of this verb pisteuo in their writings, which showed that it was talking about turning control over to someone. This verb is not just talking about credence. Depending on the context, it can and does mean turning control over to, depositing, and trusting. Now, let me explain this again. The difference between trusting and entrusting. I can trust that a bank would keep my money safely. But until I put my money in it, I have not entrusted them with anything. Same thing, I can trust that the school will educate my children. When I take the children to the school and leave them there, I have entrusted the care of those children to the school. So trust and entrust are two totally different verbs. One requires turning authority or control over to someone else, presumed responsible. The fact that we see believe in places like John 3:16 and 18, Acts 16:31, those were choices made by translators. That verb didn't have to be translated believe, and that's what this series has been trying to show you. That we are reading translation choices made by Augustinian monergists. And we need to look closely at the context to make sure that those choices that they made are actually accurate. We like to think we can trust our English Bibles. You know, if we can't trust anything else, we can trust our Bibles. Well, I'm here to tell you our English Bibles are made up of editorial choices, translating choices by men with agendas. These were not neutral academics. These were people on a mission to escape the Roman Catholic Church. And as I said just a couple of minutes ago, two of the first three who translated scriptures, the Latin and the Koine, into our English, two of them were burned at the stake for their efforts. These people were at war, and they made translation choices that would help them win that war. That should go without saying. Anyway, before I get into a long lecture about that, which I've done several times in this series, again, look for parts 1 and 2 if you really want to go into the discussion about Augustinian monergists and why they translated the way they did. Go specifically to part 2. But tonight I want to show you 10 slides about the use of this key verb, pisteuo, by first century historians and philosophers. Extra biblical evidence that proves this verb, pisteuo, which was reflexively translated believe all over our New Testament, this verb could have been translated entrust, commit, turn control over to. Those were possible translation choices. They were not made because the people who translated our Bibles into English, they wanted you to believe that God does all the saving work. It's not about you making a decision to entrust, to turn control over it. Your cooperation is not necessary. God does all the saving work, according to the original translators of the English Bible. Okay? Sola fideis. We're here to debunk that tonight. And I'm going to do so, once again, by looking at some of the first century witnesses. And you'll see in their own writings that they use this verb in a very different way. The same verb, they use it it means something very different. Next one, the part 7, which may or may not be the conclusion. We'll look at the New Testament itself, and we'll see where this verb was translated and trusted, where the context forced the easy believers to admit that the verb pisteuo, G4100, gets translated believed everywhere. Part 7 will show where in the New Testament they were actually forced to translate that verb differently. But let me not get ahead of myself. Let's go to the first century witnesses. Okay, stand by. Okay, so I got 10 slides I'm going to show you tonight. I'm trying to keep these episodes to within reason, like 45 minutes or less, which is not easy to do. I mean, you know, there's a lot to it, but I'm trying to hold it down to a manageable level, because if it goes beyond 45 minutes, there's a good chance even I won't open it. So, all right, let's get into it by going back to this one passage, which I've referred to again and again to prove that believe the gospel is probably one of the most misunderstood terms or phrases in the church world. Really comes from here. This is Mark chapter 16, verses 15 through 16. And this is post-resurrection, after Easter. And Jesus, one of the final things he's telling his disciples in the gospel according to Mark, he's telling them to go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. That's what verse 15 says. And he said unto them, go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. As I pointed out in part one, this term gospel, evangelion, most of us think it's shorthand for Christianity. Tell them about Christianity. Give them Christianity in a nutshell. That's what gospel. No. Gospel actually means it's a proclamation of good news about a major military or political development which affects everyone's status. And that's what this is. This is the story of King Jesus now, who is on his way to being crowned the King of Kings. Verse 16, he that believeth and is baptized shall be saved, but he that believeth not shall be damned. I'll put this down for a moment here. As I mentioned in previous parts, this sounds like he's talking about credulity here. He that actually believeth. Believeth what? It's not said. But we're thinking, well, he that believes the story that I actually rose from the dead, he's going to be saved. The one who doesn't, he's going to be damned. Now, this sounds like, pretty harsh to me because we cannot control what we believe. I pointed that out in episode 1. Nobody can force you to believe that which you don't believe. And there's no reason to reward you for coming to a particular conclusion or not. Nor is there any reason to damn you for that. And so on its face, this claim, the one that believes will be saved, the one who doesn't will be condemned, that sounds extraordinarily harsh to me. Why would God condemn somebody for exercising the critical faculties that he equipped them with? Well, part of the reason for this series is to explain that that's not what Jesus is talking about in Mark chapter 16, verses 15 and 16. He's not saying the one who can't make up their mind to believe the story, the one who's not fully convinced that the story is true, they're the ones who are going to be condemned. No. Believed means entrusted. The gospel is a story. The gospel is a proclamation of the news of a military or political development, like I said. And this military and political development is that the Jewish Messiah, Jesus, has come and is now on the throne. He's their king. He's the resurrected king of Israel. Okay? So you're not believing, you are entrusting authority to that proclamation. You are bowing your knee to that proclamation. If you decide that you are indeed going to submit to that authority, you're going to be saved. Another way to translate that koine verb that got translated saved would be prosper. Whenever we see the same verb, and it gets translated saved, we're thinking saved from hell. I don't think that's what Jesus is talking about. The one who submits will be prospered, will do well. The one who doesn't, the one who rebels against this authority, will be condemned. That's what Jesus is talking about in Mark chapter 16, verses 15 and 16. Yet we have been trained since our first weeks at Sunday school to believe that what Jesus is asking about in these verses is credence, credulity. We have to suspend disbelief in these miracle stories and simply grit our teeth and say, yes, I'm going to believe these stories. I've never seen a miracle, but the Bible says so. I'm going to believe it. So if I believe it, God's going to reward me, send me to heaven for being so gullible. Sorry, that's not what it's talking about. And I've been trying to show you in this series that the same verb, pisteuo, pisteuosas in this particular case, the one that got translated believed, should have been translated turn control over to, commit, deposit. There are other ways to translate this verb. We have been trained to think it's all about belief, because otherwise we're saying that our cooperation is necessary and that our works are necessary for us to be righteous. That's what we're saying here, if we translate that verb differently. And I'm saying, yeah, that's exactly what Jesus was saying too. Okay? Let me return to the show. Stand by. So before I move on to the next slides here, I want you to take a close look at the transliteration of the verb that got translated believe, believeth, pisteuosos. Okay, G4100. This is a different construction. There's numerous constructions of this particular verb. Here it's believeth. He that believeth, the one who believes, pisteuosos. Okay, so let's try and keep this in the back of your mind here going forward. Pisteuosos, because we're going to see it in this next slide I show you here. If I can get it up there. Come on now. Thank you. Okay, Philo of Alexandria. Some of you are familiar with this Jewish philosopher of the Hellenistic age. Okay, he was one of the most well-known Jewish scholars of his day. And in one of his books, he wrote a book on the life of Moses. And I'm going to go strictly to the English translation here. If you have any questions about the original language or the transliteration of it, they are on the slide. You're welcome to pause it, check it carefully. I can't go through it all myself here. Otherwise, this would be an hour and a half. I'm going to the English translation here of this portion from Philo's work on the life of Moses. And he, Jethro, the father-in-law of Moses, having entrusted, that is, turned over control. Remember, that's what we said entrust means, turn control over to. Having control turned over to him, Moses, the care of the flocks, and having committed to him, Moses, no small portion of the household, gave him also his daughter in marriage. I think if you've seen the movie The Ten Commandments, you know what we're talking about here. After Moses gets chased out of Egypt, he meets the Midians, and Jethro is the father of all the 7 or 8 different daughters, and one of the daughters is given to Moses, if you remember the scene from the movie. Well, here, this verb that got translated believe, the very same verb that we saw in Mark 16:16, and I'm going to highlight it for you here. Pisteuosos. This is what we saw in Mark 16:16. Here, it clearly means having entrusted, having turned control over. So if it means the same thing, it means having turned control over in Philo. Who is to wax dogmatic that it cannot possibly mean entrust in Mark 16:16? How do you tell me dogmatically, no, it has to mean believe in Mark 16? This is the same word. And I ask you, believe what? Why doesn't he say? If Jesus in Mark 16:16 is talking about belief, what specifically is he talking about? Is he talking about his virgin birth? Is he talking about turning the water into wine? All the other miracles? His resurrection? What exactly is it Jesus is talking about believing in Mark 16? He's not talking about believing. He's talking about turning control over to him. That's the gospel, the new authority, remember? The proclamation of a new political or military development that it changes everyone's status. The one who commits to that gospel, they're the ones who will be prospered. Move on to the next slide here. Again, this is from the same author, Philo of Alexandria. I'll go directly to the English translation, and this is from On the Life of Joseph. Before was the life of Moses. Well, this is the life of Joseph from Genesis, okay? And he, Pharaoh, having committed, again, this is the verb Pistuosos. Let me show you again here. I'm going to highlight up here. What I have in red here, I also have in the English translation in red. And it gets translated having committed. And he, Pharaoh, having committed, turned over control to him, Joseph, the government of Egypt, as to a prefect and administrator of the country, rested for his own part, having, as far as appearances went, retired from the cares of government. So Philo of Alexandria is talking about when Pharaoh, in the book of Genesis, remember the novella about Joseph, the son of Jacob, patriarch Jacob of Israel. Joseph gets sold into slavery, if you recall, and ends up becoming the prime minister of Egypt. And Philo here is writing about the story of how Pharaoh turned over power of his government to Joseph, who had been sold into slavery. And the verb that he uses to describe Pharaoh turning control over to Joseph, it's the same verb that the sola fideis translated believed in Mark 16:16. Once again, look what I have highlighted up here. Pistuosos. Pistuosos. Right here. Let me go back, show you again. Pistuosos. Mark 16:16. In Mark 16:16, it's believed. But here, in Philo, pistuosos, having committed, turned over control to him. Why is the same word spelled the same way, having committed here? And why is it translated believed in Mark 16:16? Because, like I said, the people who put our Bibles into English were Augustinian monergists. These are people who claimed God does all the saving work. Your cooperation is not required. You've been chosen for heaven. You've been chosen for hell. Not a blessed thing you can do about it. Okay? There are no works, no cooperation, no human effort is required. This is what those Augustinian monergists were arguing, because the Roman Catholic Church they were rebelling from, they had 7 sacraments. Your cooperation was needed according to the Roman Catholic Church, not according to the people who put our Bibles in English. And that's why pistuosos in Philo means turn control over. But in the Gospel of Mark, pistuosos becomes believed. Even though the content of the belief, you have to eisegete. You have to add it to the text. Okay? You understand where I'm going with this? I hope so. I got a few more to show you. Let me move it along here. Another one from Philo here. And once again, the same verb, pistuosos. This is from a text called On the Special Laws. Go to the English translation of pistuosos here. For the one having entrusted, being a friend, deposited the charge with a friend. But the one who received it became as a complete stranger, having no respect for any of the laws among men. Here, Philo is talking about someone depositing something of value with someone else presumed trustworthy. And it's the same verb, pistuosos, the same one we saw in Mark 16:16. All right, move it along again here. We have another witness. And this is from Legatio ad Gaium. I think that's the way you would say that, the Latin translation of it. And this here, Philo of Alexandria is talking about Caesar Augustus. And this is the clearest example of what I've been talking about, how this verb, pistuo, can mean entrusting political authority over to somebody else. We saw that in part 5. When I pointed to part Maccabees. In part 5, I talked about the witness of the Septuagint. Part 4 was talking about some of the older documents from Athens and all that, where the same verb is talking about turning over authority. Well, here is a really clear example of this verb, pistuo. In this case, it's pisteuotheis, not pisteuosas. As I note here at the bottom, the verb pisteuotheis, this is the verb constructed in the ARSE, the past tense, with the passive voice and the participle ending. Okay? This construction describes the person who received the authority, not somebody who's giving the authority. As we saw, pisteuosas is the one giving authority. The pisteuotheis is the one receiving the authority, or the deposit, or whatever it is, something of value. So in this construction, pisteuotheis, it is translated this way. This is he, Caesar Augustus, who was entrusted with the sovereignty of both land and sea, who brought peace to the habitable world and who put an end to the disturbances and the agitations of the cities. This is he who was entrusted. This is not he who believes something. Okay? Pisteuotheis. Again, one receives pisteuosas, you're giving authority. Pisteuotheis, you're receiving authority. It's a translation choice. We go on to Flavius Josephus. Some of you know who Josephus was. He's a first century Jewish priest, military commander, and historian. He's working for the Romans. He's giving them a history of the Jews. All right, so he has a work from what became known as Antiquities. And this is the English translation here of this passage. He's talking about, in this one here, he's talking about the 2nd century BC, when the Seleucids overthrew the Jewish Hasmonean dynasty. Okay, so this is toward the first third of the 2nd century BC. And Josephus records that having demolished the walls of the city, that is Jerusalem, he, Antiochus IV Epiphanes, he built a fortress in the lower city, and having entrusted, that is, ceded control of, this to Philip as governor of Phrygian, that's from west central Turkey. By birth, he left him there. So once again, pisteuosas, I'm going to highlight this here. It is translated having entrusted by the historian Flavius Josephus. He's talking about Antiochus IV, who is the king of Syria. They've overthrown the Jews in Israel. Okay, and now he's entrusting control of this area to someone named Philip, the governor. And the verb that they use, guess what, is the same verb that got translated, believed, in Mark 16:60. The same verb. And this fellow, Flavius Josephus, is writing at the exact same time as the people in the New Testament were writing. The middle, late third of the 1st century. Okay, this is a 1st century writing, a contemporaneous writing, extra biblical writing of the New Testament, where this verb that got translated, believed, in Mark chapter 16 and so many other places, all over John, everywhere the Augustinian monergists translated this verb, believe, this same verb here is translated to mean turning control over something important to someone considered trustworthy. And what I've been trying to say is that's what this verb means in our New Testaments. It's not talking about credence. It's talking about submission, about giving control to someone. That's the gospel. A new authority who needs to be submitted to. All right, let's see what else Josephus has to add here. Got a few more slides here. And, you know, I'm showing you a few slides here. The truth is, I could have made 100 slides from these 1st century witnesses, not just these men here. There's all kinds of examples where this verb gets translated, turn control over to. I'm just giving you a sampling here, okay? Here's another one. This one is also from Antiquities. And the English translation is, but Alexander made an attempt upon the fortresses that were about the city, of which there are 2, The one belonged to the city itself, the other to the temple. And the one having been entrusted with these has the whole nation under his hand. It is the same verb, pisteuosos. One having been entrusted, the one having been ceded control to, the one you've given control to. That's what Jesus is talking about in Mark 16:16. Not the one who believed the story, the one who gave control to him. That's what the gospel is. There's a new authority. Okay. All right. Let me show you a couple more. I don't want to wear you out with it, but here's another one. This one, another one from Antiquities. And he, King Herod the Great, having entrusted, turned over control to him. He's talking about Joseph, his treasurer and brother-in-law. The guardianship of the fortresses and the care of the city was himself carried away to the ships. King Herod was carried away to the ships. Once again, what's the verb? Here, I'm highlighting it. Pisteuosos. Here it is in red in the original language. Okay. This is the transliteration. And this is the way we translate it in English. Having entrusted means having turned control over to. Okay. He, Herod the Great, turned control over to him, Joseph, his treasurer. Doesn't mean he believed Joseph, the treasurer. He turned control over to him. Quite a significant difference. Again, this is the same word. I want to show you again. Maybe you've forgotten already. Let me go back to it. Pisteuosos. This is Mark 16:16, okay? The same exact spelling you've seen in the last 5 slides. He that believeth and is baptized shall be saved. How about he that turns over control and is baptized shall be prospered, delivered, not saved from hell, prospered, delivered, made whole. These are alternative translations of the same Koine verb, sozo. I believe it's 4982. The same verb that the same spin doctors who put our scriptures into English translated as saved because they knew you would eisegete saved from hell. No. Prospered. He that commits, he that turns control over and is baptized shall be prospered, but he that does not shall be damned, shall be condemned. Okay? Let me go back to this here. Where was I? Up to 58 here. Yeah, this was the last slide I showed you. Let me go to the next one here. I only got a couple more here. This is another one here. All right, I think I already showed you this one. Let me go back then to the next one. I got 2 left here. Yeah, and this shows that we just looked at Mark 16:16, the one that believeth not shall be condemned. Well, this is the same verb here that was used in Mark 16:16, gets translated believeth not, apostasos, all right? But here's another translation, okay? Here's another use, the same century, right? From Josephus. And the English translation reads, but Malachus thought to deceive those about Herod by a denial of the plot against Herod the Great's father, Antipater. And having proved unfaithful toward his benefactor. This is the way they translate apostasos. Proved unfaithful toward his benefactor, he swore that he had done him no evil. Now look at what I have here in the bottom here, the note. Mark 16:16, the KJV says, he that believeth and is baptized shall be saved, but he that believeth not, apostasis, the same verb that they translated believeth not, as if skepticism was a problem. This same verb gets translated proved unfaithful. Proved unfaithful. It was a translator's choice in Mark 16:16 too. But proved unfaithful, if you would put proved unfaithful in Mark 16:16, then you're talking about your own cooperation, aren't you? And these Augustinian monarchists couldn't have that, could they? No. Your cooperation is not required, because if it was, if your cooperation, if you had to stay faithful, well, that means God isn't sovereign. He's not the one choosing who goes to heaven, who goes to hell. It's you. You're doing the choosing. One last slide here. I'm going to throw in Appian. Just for good luck, Appian of Alexandria, Egypt. He's a Greek historian, a high-ranking Roman citizen who authored a massive 24-volume history of Rome. All right, this is from a book called Bella Civilia, and the English translation of this passage is, and having entrusted, again, giving control of the army to the general, he himself was carried upon the ships, and having entrusted the army to the general, not having believed the army, having entrusted. Again, what's the word here? Pisteuesas. And having entrusted. Kai pisteuesas. This is not talking about credence, folks. Again, I could have shown you 30 more slides with quotes, not only from Josephus, not only from Philo, not only from Appian, but from half a dozen others. I'm not going to wear you out with this. If you still have any doubts that the verb that got translated believed in Mark 16:16 could not have been translated entrusted, do your own research. Okay? You want to be stubborn and say, well, cherry picking? No. I gave you several examples that this verb from contemporary writers, like the people who are writing at the same time the gospel according to Mark was written, they use this verb to mean something very different. They meant turn control over. And I'm here telling you, this is your bad grandpa here, telling you that in Mark 16:16, Jesus is not talking about people who are gullible. No, he is saying the one who entrusts to him will be prospered. But the one who rebels against him, they're going to be condemned. And yeah, this is about cooperation. This is about works. That dirty word works. Not works of the Torah, but yes, human cooperation. In part 7, I'm going to show you those 8 New Testament verses where the same word gets translated entrusted. So if you haven't had enough historical witnesses, or you don't trust the historical witnesses' use of it, you think, well, they're not in the Bible, I don't have to believe them. Well, I'm going to show you where the same verb gets translated entrusted in our New Testament, okay? Part 7. Come back for that one. All right. Till then, your bad grandpa saying, have a happy Easter, everyone. God bless. Bye now.